Megan Ramos is a Canadian clinical researcher. She joined Dr. Jason Fung and his colleagues as a research student with a keen interest in preventative medicine when she was just 15 years old. She's a world leading expert on therapeutic fasting and low carbohydrate diets and has guided over 10,000 people worldwide. Passionate about overcoming her own health hurdles through diet and lifestyle modifications, she left the research team to co found intensive dietary management IDM along with Dr. Fung. She had been diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease at age 12, polycystic ovarian syndrome at age 14, and type 2 diabetes at age 27. She was able to reverse these metabolic conditions and achieve an 86-pound weight loss since incorporating intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating protocols in combination with a low-carb diet. We are going to be discussing the benefits and the myths of intermittent fasting, specifically related to women. So, what are the specific benefits of fasting for women, both in terms of physical health but also cognitive function?
Yes. So, in terms of physical health, fasting is a great way to lose excess body fat. It's a great way to reverse metabolic disease, things like fatty liver disease and type 2 diabetes. You can often improve high blood pressure, these things that we end up on tons of medications for, we don't want to be on. Fasting is also great in the prevention of things like osteoporosis, which we know is such a huge problem in the female population, especially these days. And it's something that can actually help course correct that as well. So that is something that I know is at the forefront of so many women's minds, even my own as I get older with family history. So that's a really cool benefit of fasting as well. Fasting is also great for just our overall hormonal health. So a lot of women at the various stages of their lives experience different benefits of fasting. Younger women can treat PCOS. They can start to have regular cycles. They can see their sex hormones start to normalize, which is fantastic. If they do have PCOS, some of the unwanted symptoms or side effects can dissipate and resolve entirely, which is fantastic. So, we've had women who have never had a cycle in their 20s start having regular cycles. We've had women who've gone through multiple rounds of IVF that have failed, be able to successfully become pregnant. So all of those myths out there about fasting being detrimental to female fertility are just not really founded in good science. I'm 39, I'm pregnant. This is something they told me at 14 would not be possible because of my PCOS. So there's a lot of hope out there, ladies. And then as we get older, like menopause, that can contribute to the development of insulin resistance. It doesn't have to. You don't have to gain all this weight. And if you gain weight, you can lose it. And you don't have to suffer through a lot of the unwanted side effects of menopause as well. Fasting and a real food, nutrition-based diet, like a low-carb diet, paleo diet, they can really help combat a lot of these symptoms. So physiologically, fasting is great for women across the age spectrum. And then in terms of cognitive benefits, we've had so many people be able to come off of antidepressants, anti-anxiety medications, ADHD medications. The mental clarity comes back. The sharpness and focus comes back. The resiliency to handle stress comes back. I even remember the initial COVID lockdowns when no one in the world really knew or understood what was going on. We had a kind of a crazy family emergency at the time. And I remember thinking I had two options. I could dive into comfort foods from my childhood, but then feel really anxious and overwhelmed and sad about everything and not be able to be a strong pillar of support for my family. Or I could stick to my principles and I could stay sharp and focus and be a really good pillar of support. And it was so cool to have that be in my control and be able to have been a really great resource for the ones that I loved during that goofy time in the last few years. So there's a lot of great benefits as well. We can really thrive at any stage of life. I so look forward to getting older now because I know it just gets better.
I love that. Okay, so we have a lot of men listening here, and they may be like, oh, this is just about women, which, yes, it is. But so much research is always done into men and how it impacts them. And you have taken this opportunity to actually focus on women. So, for everyone listening, what are the primary hormonal and metabolic differences between men and women that affect their fasting experience?
Well, it depends on the particular age group of the women that we're talking about. So, women who are postmenopausal and men have very similar fasting journeys. We can fast the same, we can largely eat the same. Now, I am a big believer in personalized nutrition. Some people do better on different sort of ends of the real food spectrum, from plants to animals, and I support whatever works for the individual. But when it comes to fasting protocols, men and women who are postmenopausal can do the same thing. We don't have as many female sex hormones to contend with later on in life, or women are taking some bioidentical supplementation, and that tends to be more stable and monitored because they're not experiencing as extreme cycles in their hormones every month on the same dosage of medication throughout the particular month. And so that's really neat to see. You know, we get these couples that are later in life trying to get control of their health, and they can follow the same nutritional and fasting plans, and it doesn't disrupt their household. They don't have to do anything different, and they obtain similar results. You know, the men and women are coming off their diabetes medication the same and having to go buy new clothes at the same rate because they're losing fat. So that's something that we can really much enjoy, men and women together, friends, family, significant others. It's something we can do together without really having to drastically modify things for different sex hormones and the different genders. When a woman is still cycling, she does experience more hormonal fluctuations throughout the month. So women who are in that first phase of their monthly cycle, so leading up from when our period starts to ovulation, we call that the follicular phase. That tends to be a little bit easier to fast because estrogen's a dominant hormone. It's an appetite suppressing hormone. But then when ovulation occurs, nature wants us to procreate. I mean, we might not want to procreate all of the time, but our evolutionary design makes us want to procreate. So appetite goes up, things like that help support the development of a potential embryo into a fetus. So we get these hormonal shifts that happen around ovulation. So estrogen, this lovely appetite suppressing hormone, becomes very low. Progesterone, this appetite driving hormone, becomes very high, just to help support the potential development of a baby down the road. So this luteal phase of the cycle, from ovulation to the end of the cycle, which is roughly day 28 by the textbooks, this is when it can be a little bit more challenging for women to fast. This can be a little bit more of a difficult time for women to lose body fat if that's a goal that they're trying to achieve, because they're going against some evolutionary hormonal structures at this time. So when a woman is cycling, you know, we tend to be a little bit more aggressive with the fasting during the first half of the cycle, and then focus more on time restricted eating and just good sort of meal timing etiquette in the second half of the cycle, as well as good nutrition. And depending on their goals, fertility or not, or if there's progesterone issues, you know, we will then modify their diet accordingly. So younger women who are still cycling, we tend to have to be a little bit nuanced with their fasting. So they might have to roll with the ebbs and flows in their cycle. Unlike a man of the same age group, like someone like my husband, he's 34, he's a baby compared to me, but he can just do the same thing all of the time. You know, things that affect men's ability to fast, you know, are largely stress. When stress hormones come into play, they affect men and women the same in terms of driving up our appetite, cravings, insulin, blood sugar levels. So someone like my husband just has to, you know, if he's stressed out, he'll modify his fast. If he's not, he can do the same program week in and week out. Whereas someone like me outside of pregnancy, you know, I might modify my schedule based on where I am in my cycle.
That is mind blowing to me. I honestly, I have to tell you that this is like the first time I've heard it being spoken about in this way. That Okay, so for instance, for me, I am generally healthy. My labs are good. I don't have a ton of weight to lose. I would implement fasting, and I do implement fasting in my life for reasons such as autophagy, right?
Mhm.
Stuff where I want my body to just reset and recover and have the ability to renew. And
Yeah.
so making sure that or implementing a fasting protocol for myself where I do a fast once a month, for instance, during the first week of my menstrual cycle makes so much sense, right? Is this what you recommend for a population that may be healthy, that doesn't necessarily have polycystic ovarian syndrome or any other health related issues?
Yeah, there are a lot of healthy women out there, like women and men, that are looking to fast for disease prevention or
Yeah.
for autophagy. So that deep cellular recycling that happens, it's great for anti-aging and is great for disease prevention. Certain things, especially like neurological conditions, or there's a lot of research being done. My husband's actually working on this, on inducing autophagy in certain cells to
Wow.
prevent and treat certain types of cancers. So that's what a lot of people are like, why did you leave Canada? That's why we left Canada, for so he could work on that project. So it's really cool. There's just a ton of interest in autophagy. So tons of people, younger, older, in good health. So if a woman is cycling and they occasionally want to do these longer fasts for autophagy, they'll find that it's a lot easier to do it, usually sort of around day 2 or 3 of their cycle into, about sort of day 10 to 12 of their cycle on a sort of a typical 28-day cycle period. So that's when we would recommend it. Even I do about 4 longer fasts a year outside of baby making, for disease prevention. And I always kind of look at my cycle. I can fast at any point in my cycle, but some points are a lot easier than others. So, why wouldn't I do it during a time where my body hormonally favors it more and it's less stress on my body? So, earlier in the cycle would be ideal if you're looking to get in some, whether it's, you're someone who does time restricted eating and wants to throw in like a 36-hour fast, or if you're going to do like a 3-day fast, for sort of optimizing autophagy during that time. The first part of the cycle is ideal.
And the 36-hour or the 3-day fast, is that a water only fast, or what do you recommend?
So we typically recommend sticking to water and salt if you are looking for autophagy. Although, with that being said, we have plenty of patients who drink coffee and who drink tea, and we see C-section SARS disappearing after 30 years. And, we see all these visible signs of autophagy actively occurring. So if, I had to bet my piggy bank that tea and coffee were not very prohibitory, especially during like a 36 to like a 3-day fast, I would bet my piggy bank. I've seen just too many clinical observations of autophagy happening at a pretty excellent rate when these things are consumed. One thing we would minimize the use of, though, is protein-related fasting tools. So things like bone broth. We have some pretty good data showing that protein is very inhibitory for autophagy. So those are some, like that would be something that we would try to minimize. But I wouldn't say you have to give up your morning cup of coffee or your morning matcha or, tea if that's something you really enjoy. I've just seen so many cool benefits happen clinically. So those I wouldn't be too nervous of. Sometimes people ask too about other appetite suppressants like apple cider vinegar. It's something people commonly take in the morning because it's got great benefits for the liver and for gut health, but also can help suppress appetite. And I haven't seen something like that be contradictory towards autophagy goals as well.
That's fantastic. Okay, so a lot of the audience, the people that are listening now, are quite fit individuals. a large number of people from the CrossFit community, who aren't necessarily struggling with their weight, but once again would be doing this for autophagy. What about exercise during fasting? Especially like the 3-day fast. I think 36 hours, like we can all have our energy levels, but maybe when it comes to the 3-day fast, we may be feeling a little bit tired. And also the myth or this idea that fasting leads to muscle loss.
Yeah, absolutely. I do work with a lot of pro athletes. They're usually people trying to target certain health issues that they have in addition to just being these excellent functioning human beings. I mean, we all have things. One of them most notably was George St Pierre, who's spoken about working with Jason and I. He's the Canadian UFC champion. As a Canadian, I should know more. But I just know he is a very slender man in terms of body fat with an exceptional amount of muscle mass. And what he was he's talked very publicly about looking at fasting to help with colitis related issues. So for that, we typically do 36-hour fasts or some 3-day fasts. And he was very keen to try a 5-day fast. And he shared this all over Instagram and on various podcasts too. So we've got this individual who's like got next to no body fat trying to do these longer fasts. And then if you've ever followed him on Instagram, he doesn't sit for longer than 30 minutes without doing some type of physical activity. So there's a few things to take into consideration. You can be active during a fast. I actually had my best strength training session ever at 96 hours fasted. But there's certain activities we wouldn't necessarily want to do fasted. So like I wouldn't train for a marathon fasted. Any type of kind of glycolytic sports I wouldn't do. So it wouldn't be, I wouldn't try to optimize my cardiovascular activity, while doing a longer fast, especially if it's not something I do regularly or I don't have metabolic issues where there's just plenty of circulating glucose as it is in my system. But strength training is fine. The hydration component of it's most important. So making sure that you get an adequate hydration a good 90 minutes before you work out and then throughout your workout and afterwards. So a lot of the time people take a bottle of water with some salt in it, or maybe like one of those packets of like Element or something in it, and they'll drink that on the way to the gym. But you're not really allowing proper time for it to be absorbed into your system. Like we have to digest this and it has to be transported around to actually hydrate our muscles. So we recommend, about 90 minutes before your intended workout to have your hydration and try to finish it about 60 minutes before you work out. And then that way, when you do show up at whatever type of training facility you're going to be at, that your body is well hydrated. And then, of course, staying hydrated throughout your workout and after your workout. And then it's just really important to understand, too, that hydration just isn't water. It's water plus some salt and perhaps some electrolytes, other electrolytes, depending on your body's needs and any other health conditions that you might have. So certain people, we watch potassium, certain people, we add in potassium. So that tends to be a little bit more personalized. Magnesium seems to be important for most individuals. So we just want to make sure that adequate hydration is happening. So more sort of strength training, whether it's body weight or, actual weight training, tend to be very complementary to fasting. And, when we do fast, we do see some protein breakdown when we fast. For people who do carry excess body fat, they do tend to have quite a substantial amount of excess protein in their system. So it becomes less of a concern in this population that people who do carry excess body fat, they're burning that body fat. So the connective tissue that was there to support the body fat is no longer needed. So the body can break down those particular protein resources. Now, if someone doesn't have the fat support, we do work on their diet, on their eating days to try to drive up their protein and dietary fat intake to help support the fast. We will see a bit of protein breakdown still happening during the longer fasts in a population with very little body fat, so very athletic CrossFit community. But what's cool about fasting, and really what distinguishes it from calorie restriction diets, because most people will say, but hey, Megan, isn't it just extreme calorie restriction? It's not, because there's this nervous system response that happens when you're actively fasting and you're not giving your body really any sufficient caloric intake. You have 35 calories from a cup of black coffee is nothing. So your body has this nervous system response, and in response to that, you produce these counter-regulatory hormones. You produce noradrenaline, helps you maintain your resting metabolic rate. You produce human growth hormone. So while you're fasting, you're actively producing human growth hormone. And this is something that we produce plentiful as children and adolescents and teenagers, but as we become young adults, we're not really making a whole lot of it anymore, except for when we sleep. And then our sleep quality tends to decline as we age, and we stop really manufacturing a ton of it at all. So when you fast, you actually produce quite a lot of human growth hormone. So you're not growing into the Hulk while you're fasting, but you are producing this human growth hormone at an adolescent-like pace. So when you re-enter the feeding cycle, you have what ends up being sort of the perfect cocktail to build lean mass. So you get the human growth hormone from your fast, but you get the protein and amino acids from the meal that you've consumed and the insulin from the meal that you've consumed. And then you very quickly replenish any protein loss, and then you can actively gain lean protein as well. So a lot of these, athletes who do these longer fasts, like GSP, who did 36 all the time in 3 days and 5 days, we never saw a loss in his lean mass. In fact, he actually gained some lean mass throughout the journey. So you might see a temporary loss during a longer fast. You'll see a quick regain of that loss, and then, hopefully some additional gain as well with consistency.
That is fascinating. Okay, we're almost at the end, so I have one more question. We are all so individual, and you are one of the biggest proponents of saying that each person is an individual. I know what people are thinking. Well, how do I figure out what's best for me? How do I figure out what works? Like, where do I find these fasting protocols? How can we help the audience understand for themselves what's going to be best?
Yeah, so we've tried to create a whole variety of different tools to help people navigate this journey, whether they want to sort of navigate it independently or navigate it with some assistance. So we do have a lot of resources. My colleague, Dr. Jason Fung, and I, we've put out quite a few books. So a book that I recently published is The Essential Guide to Intermittent Fasting for Women. Thank you, Karen. And there's sort of a step-by-step guide with some recommendations. So if someone wanted to try a self-guided approach, I think the same part, I always say like part 3 is for both men and women. There are some strategies definitely geared towards females for managing certain things that females typically tend to manage, but it's applicable for both men and women. And then, of course, we do have a community where people can go through and sort of navigate additional supportive resources. And then we do coaching as well, one-on-one and in small groups, to help shortcut our determination of what might be an optimal personalized approach, or go through some metabolic health assessments with you to help customize a plan.
Wonderful. Well, Megan, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for all that you do and for the amazing health that you bring into this world. I can't wait to see what's next, including your baby. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Karen. I always enjoyed our chats.